Welcome to Decision Space, the only podcast that takes place between the turns of your favorite games. I'm Jake.
I'm Paul.
And today we are here for episode 2 of Paul and Jake talk about their random plays.
Oh yeah.
When Brendan is away. So I guess just a little bit of housekeeping. We should first start off by congratulating Brendan on the birth of his baby. Sounds like baby, mother are healthy and doing well, and that they're just really happy. So super exciting, Brendan. Congratulations. And I know that we are all wishing you the very best on this journey.
Fabulous. Big step.
Yeah. The bad news is that Brendan is understandably not here today. And he might be on a little bit of paternity leave from the podcast for a while, but I think he's going to still try and do maybe next week, but then maybe he'll be off for a week. And I'm going to try and bring in some guests and do some fun stuff to fill time when he's not here, such as having Paul here today to talk about some new hotness.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to talk about Ankh.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to
talk
talk
last night.
We're going to talk about snakes.
Yep.
And maybe some other stuff as well. I've already got scheduled 2 other exciting guests. 2 of the best kickball players in the entire world we're going to be recording. I'm going to be recording with them next week. So we're going to talk about the decisions in kickball.
Excited.
So that's something exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
But Paul, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm pretty good. I'm a little tired right now. Stayed up last night a little bit too late with some friends playing board games. That's been a problem of mine. Historically, I stay up too late playing games. This was only like a 1 o'clock, 1:30 deal. But so I'm a little tired. But outside of that, feeling good. Happy to be here. And I'm proud of Decision Space that you guys updated your benefits. You do have like a paternity leave at this point. That's, I think, healthy and important.
Yeah. No, we don't pay our employees at all. But we have like really fantastic benefits.
It's essentially like an unlimited, unpaid family leave.
Yeah. Infinite vacation time.
That's
awesome.
Kind
of that's something we offer to all staff.
And it's like work from home. It's very modern.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so hopefully other people listening can take notes, strive to do a little bit better in their corporate dealings.
Exactly.
But that's not really what we're here to talk about.
No.
We're here to talk about board games. So I was thinking, let's maybe talk first about snakes, because that's the one we both played together.
And the last time I was here, we were talking about Phil Walker Harding, and this is one of his many 2021 releases. In fact, one of his several Target exclusive releases. Summer Camp from Buffalo Games is a Target exclusive. Snakes from Big Potato Games, Target exclusive. And now the Tetris strategy game, which I just picked up. Also Target exclusive from Buffalo Games. But yeah, Snakes is, for those that don't know, a pretty boiled down deduction game, social deduction game, trivia game for 4 to 8 players. And briefly, the way that it works, you have a stack of cards, and everybody will have a secret role. Basically, half the people are going to be good, and half the people are going to be snakes. Don't let them charm you. And you'll read off a question. Multiple choice trivia question, and then everybody closes their eyes for 5 seconds, flip it over, the snakes get to see the answer. Then you have 2 minutes of discussion, and then at the end, you're going to vote. Snakes get a point for everyone that gets it wrong. All the other people get a point for everybody that gets it right. 6 rounds of that, see who wins.
So it's a pretty fascinating little game. I had just off the top, I had a lot of fun playing it. It was great for kind of like before the game night started.
It was an awesome
What do we have, like 8 people?
Yeah.
Something like that standing around. So we tried out, you taught it, and we played it in 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the really interesting things about Snakes is that there is a time-limited discussion of when you're doing the clues. So that's like, you only have 2 minutes to come up with an answer, whatever you're going to vote for. But that's also the time you have to sort of suss out who might be snakes among you. So it's really tight.
Yeah.
Not a lot of discussion can really happen there. And I just think that's a really interesting dynamic in the game compared to something like The Resistance or Secret Hitler, where you can really talk as long as you want and try and, grill somebody and boil down who might be the traitor.
Yeah, deception has, I think, a really interesting time length thing, which is that the forensic scientist, who's like the person kind of that can't talk and is facilitating, they have unlimited time and they call the shot of when a round ends. So you can do a lot with that, right? You can just insist that people keep talking as a way to signal like you don't have it. Maybe that's, I don't know. People don't tend to do that, I guess. The other point of comparison was werewords, which I think is like 4 minutes of similar stuff. And in that game, when you have somebody that knows the word and needs it to be guessed, then as that time starts to run out, their strategy changes. They try to lean in towards that. Something I really liked about this game is it's 6 rounds that are really fast, like you said, maybe 15 minutes total for the game. And you have basically a 50-50 shot of being a snake or, a normal person or whatever it's called. There's also the mongoose of truth who's, everybody knows they want people to get it right. They sort of reveal themselves. But those will change throughout the game. You might play a snake 4 times and a normal person twice or whatever. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it is cool being able to switch roles back and forth. And I think, it's very likely that you'll get the chance to play both roles at least once.
Yeah.
Though we did find in just one initial play, and who knows, maybe this game will have a meta that changes the dynamic as you play more, but it did seem like the snakes were doing very well in the game, and the person who was on the snakes team the most ended up kind of running away with the game.
I think that mathematically, all things being equal, the snake will get a point for each guess that is 2 of the 3 possibilities.
Right.
And the other people have to hit the one that is correct. So it makes some sense that snakes have a natural advantage when no one maybe knows anything. Speaking of knowing things, it's a trivia game. And the questions were typically about, like, I don't know, what would you say, like... Well, some of the questions were really old stuff. Like Lassie was in there.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, it was, what is the TV show that has the most episodes ever, and we were kind of coming down to like, is it Law and Order or Lassie?
Right.
And I think, I for whatever reason I just threw Lassie in there, and that ended up being right.
Right.
Save 1 point for us, but yeah, if you don't know the answer and nobody on the good team has like a reasonable hunch, you're kind of going, the snakes can just let you hang yourselves, basically. And that's what I found on the time when I was a snake. The good team or whatever was immediately going down the wrong path.
And that's fine, because of course it's more likely, right? So there's so many possibilities that there are those 3, but the 2 of those are wrong. So it's more likely they're going to be going that way, and you just sort of let it happen and speak towards it.
It was kind of interesting though to like play that role. Like I still found it like an interesting dynamic, because you still want to, you could mess it up, and I feel like there was a different time in the game when I said something, and then somebody came like really strong against what I was saying, and I instantly knew that person must be a snake. Right. Which I think that was the Lassie one, and that like clued me in. Yeah. I was like, okay, well, I know I'm not a snake. Why are they saying so strongly this other thing? If they didn't know for sure. So there is interesting stuff happening there.
Yeah, there was some social deduction gameplay where, the thing that came up a lot was we kind of go around the table and say, what are you leaning towards? And if something came up that like 7 out of the 8 of us were really gunning for A, we knew that was probably wrong, because half the people would want us to get it wrong.
Right.
And so I feel like even as you go around the table, any strategy of person could lie about that to try to get a read off of other people. Or, if the snakes, when they have their eyes closed, all kind of mouth to each other, let's all actually get them to say the right one, then they might, double back on it and go, no, that can't be right, and guess something else. You know?
And I do think that speaks well of the game. Like in any good social deduction game, right, there could be an evolving meta.
Sure.
Because that was something, all of us playing the first time started realizing, we're like, something's wrong here if 4 or if 5 or more people said the same thing, because one of them must know that's wrong. So like you're saying, in a future play, if I was a snake and people were going down the right answer, I'd maybe start strongly advocating for that too. So yeah, it was fun, and I do think that the mashup of trivia and social deduction,
it's good.
It works surprisingly well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious to see what it'll be like. I will probably play this the most with students in my classroom, which will typically be like 9th graders, let's say. And, if we had a question about Law and Order, Lassie, and something else, they might just have no point of context. But still, a certain chunk of them would know the answer. And so you can read off of that level of interest too,
Right. Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they'll enjoy it or not.
I think that's the ultimate challenge that's going to rub some people wrong. Like, if you don't like trivia at all, if just the typical thing about trivia frustrates you about like knowing the answer or not knowing the answer, like that's still present here.
Yeah, it's still there.
The person who knows more answers than other people is going to have a better shot at somebody who knows less.
Yeah.
That said, I am kind of one of those people. Trivia is really a big thing here in St. Louis. Yep. There's all kinds of trivia as like fundraisers, a lot of big bar trivia culture. And so I've done it a lot, and I get like frustrated by that because I'm like, this isn't a very interesting game. Sure. It's like I know the answer or I don't. Somebody needs to gamify this. Yeah. and so, that's still there. And I probably knew one answer. I think there was, in the whole game out of the 6, there was one that I had like a reasonably good hunch on. Yeah. And I still had a good time with it.
Yeah, totally. I think as we played it towards the end, I was a little underwhelmed being such a lover of Phil Walker Harding and like maybe expecting a ton. Because as we played it, I didn't feel like I could do a lot. But in hindsight, I'm thinking about a lot more opportunities to play it and what that could be like. And just, playing as a snake, maybe just saying you know the answer at the start. She's like, I definitely know it's this. And just kind of writing that as hard as you can, which nobody did ever, basically, in our
Because they didn't need to. Like, the person who won was a snake almost every time and said almost nothing.
But even the people that were trying to get it right never knew enough to just say, no, I know that it's this. Right. A lot of people said, well, there's a lot of episodes of Law and Order. But nobody was like, no, I know.
Yeah. So, yeah. That'd be tough, though. Yeah. You'd be like, oh, I don't, you guys, I'm like a huge film, movie, TV show buff, and I know for sure Lassie had 816 episodes.
That was an insane number.
I don't know that I would believe you.
It was crazy. The other thing that's going to keep it in the collection, as opposed to something like Werewords, which I think is really similar in its like quick playing. The 2 points of difference: one, Werewords Deluxe or whatever can accommodate 12 players, maybe more, which is great for me having a classroom of kids. But the teach on snakes is dead simple. Like, it is so simple to explain and play, and that's a huge thing. I think that it's very rare in this hobby to find games that are good and have that quick of a teach.
Yeah. I think my kind of final takeaway with it, which I would happily play it again. I don't know that I'm going to rush out and buy it from my local Target.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think was really interesting that intrigues me moving forward is just doing social deduction in such a short time.
Yeah.
Because I would like to, I think this game might be interesting with like, what would it be like if you extended that time or just didn't play with the time limit to see, which you could easily do. Because it did feel like quite a few times, like we were starting to like figure out who might be in what role, which is important to know. But then, even accusing somebody, like, I think you're a person because of this, this, and this. And everyone's like, okay, great. So we have 10 seconds to make our guess now. So that doesn't really help us get to the answer.
Yeah.
But it was also the time that also kind of forced everyone to make their own internal assessments about who was a snake and who wasn't.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is cool in other ways just from social deduction, because a lot of times a game like The Resistance or Secret Hitler can kind of be dominated by the loudest personalities. Definitely. Like the people who are like willing to like yell and talk the most.
Yeah.
So it's cool in that sense that like people were able and kind of forced to make those internal reflections.
And again, that comes down to those shifting roles too, because you don't have to commit to a lie for a 30-minute game, like you would in something like Resistance. you just do it for 2 minutes and then you might switch off and nobody can really carry anything over from round to round.
Yeah. So that'd be an interesting experiment too. Do this game with no time limit. Maybe do my next game Resistance. Be like, all right, pick the team. All right, we've got 60 seconds. Yeah. Everyone has to have their vote in. That would be interesting.
I do like timers in games. I always use a chess clock for code names, and I wouldn't want to play it without. Each team has a certain... You run out of 5 minutes for your team for all the pondering and touching and everything, you just lose.
That is really fascinating.
Yeah. Because they give you like a sand timer.
Yeah, but I've never played
almost no explanation.
I've never seen anybody use the sand timer in the game.
I think the formal explanation is if you feel like it's taking a long time,
that's right.
Give it a flip, and then they're on the clock for a minute.
That's such a horrible rule, because that's just like... Yeah, if you want to be a big dick about it, you could just force the other team to play faster
for a minute.
But that'd be pretty lame of you. Is basically what it's saying.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you get to that point, and I've played Codenames games where it's like people are taking 5-10 minute turns just to sit and think. And
think
it's
about the
fun.
Clues. Yeah,
and then you flip the thing over. You still have to wait a minute. That's crazy. So anyway, perhaps we should shift gears to some new hotness.
Let's do it.
All right. So, cool mini or not, Simon, come on. Whatever you like to call them. Ankh has just come out for my backers arriving now. And this is, for those that may not know, the third in this God trilogy from Eric Lang, which includes Blood Rage, then Rising Sun, and now Ankh, set in ancient Egypt. And you have basically gods with incredible minis. It's one of these incredible mini games. Battling for dominance over the monuments of Egypt, essentially. And I played it last night. It only took us about 2 hours, 2.5 with learning, which I feel like is a pretty good time for what it was. And I had so many thoughts. So I won't really be able to give an overview, but I'll tell you some of the interesting things. The first one set up the end of the game, which was one of the most engaging ends to this style of game. I played 3 players, and essentially there's a time track that you move up along this time, and various events happen where you might take control of a monument, or there might be battles, and you're trying to score majorities in monument types, or somebody might separate the land into separate territories. But at some point, after maybe the third big conflict event, the 2 lowest performing gods merge and become a super god, sort of like an Amun-Re type situation, and that's set up for any game that's 3 players or more. And you basically, there's a points track which is devotion, and the 2 bottom on this devotion track join powers, and they get combined god powers plus some of the other stuff that you had built up. But it made it. We had these incredibly huge comeback turns, so that right at the end of the game felt super duper tense of who was going to win. I mean, it felt like we were blowing off massive combos, but we did end up losing. So that part of it was really satisfying.
So, you play as a god.
Yeah.
So 2 players are now teaming up against the person that's in first place. That's really fascinating, because as soon as you said you played with 3, my first thought was well, that's incredibly fraught for this kind of fighty territory control game.
Yeah, right. And it's most, what I thought was really cool is that you put these pieces out on the board and they stick around a lot. And like I said, there's only, I think in the whole game that we played, 5 rounds of combat. And in each round of combat, you go through all the different areas, a lot like Rising Sun, if you've played that. Have you played any of these games?
I played Blood Rage, but not Rising Sun.
And so Blood Rage, it has the drafting, obviously, but then the main action mechanism of that game is the rage. Right? So you have this rage economy that you're trying to upgrade, and it works. In Rising Sun, the action economy is you're drafting actions from the stack. But in Ankh, the action wouldn't even be called an action economy, really. There's 4 actions, and they each have a track. And on your turn, most of the time, you pick an action and perform that action and slide the thing up the track. And then you can do another action that's below that. So if you do the high one, then you get a lot of options. If you do the bottom one, that's the only one you can do. Okay? When those things, and the actions are like, move your figures around the board, put a new figure on the board, get some followers, which is kind of like the resource in the game, but it's cool thematic ties to that. Maybe basically if you want to spend them, you like sacrifice your followers, which is kind of crazy. And then the bottom one is unlock Ankh powers. Come back to that. But as these get to the end of their tracks, these little action markers get to the end of the tracks, whoever's the person that puts it on the last space triggers that timeline to move forward. And whatever it moves forward, they're the person that gets to do it. So you really want to be the person that triggers that little, event or whatever.
Oh, gotcha.
So you're playing a little bit of chicken. I don't want to set you up to be the guy to go there. But that was super cool. So the combat system is kind of borrowed from Rising Sun a little bit, and a little bit of Blood Rage. It's like a mixture where you have strength. Most of your pieces on the board are 1 strength, and everybody plays a card. You have the same set of like 8 cards that give you an option on that turn, and they're things like a little bit, like Loki strat. Maybe your guys die, you get a point for everybody that dies, or you get a follower for everybody that's in a green space and they can't die, or whatever. Mm-hmm. All these kinds of things. And one of them, which I thought was really interesting, is the Plague. You play a Plague card, and then before the battle resolves, you bid followers. And you sacrifice as many followers as you want. And whoever sacrifices the most, if there is somebody that has sacrificed more than everybody else, they get to keep their pieces and everybody else's pieces are removed. And so you can kind of have this like totally alternate battle that's like economic based that sometimes happens. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. The thing that I guess intrigues me about it the most is that you mentioned you felt like there were strong catch-up mechanisms and like that you were coming back in, because I'm not the biggest fan of Blood Rage. Mm-hmm. I owned it. I probably played it 5 or 6 times, and I had a good time with it, but the reason it ultimately left my collection was just because it felt like in most of the games, somebody would snowball pretty hard and kind of like run away with it by the half or 2/3 through the game. Yeah. Because, as you're describing, well, it sounds like in this, there's kind of 2 phases to the combat, right? There's the fighting and then this economic thing that might matter, might not. Where in Blood Rage, it's all one, right? The winning person gets the reward and wipes everyone else.
Correct.
Correct. Which makes it, pretty zero sum.
Yeah. And in that, in Blood Rage, your whole game builds a strategy of, of basically like, I'm doing the Loki strat. That was the one that like got, kind of, it's owning the meta or whatever, and players are playing around that. Where you're trying to get pieces on the board and you're trying to kill them to get points. And that's a thing. But that only builds in one direction, whereas these cards that you play in Ankh, they're kind of like situational strategies. And so you might set yourself up to do something in one part of the battle that you wouldn't even think about doing in another piece of the battle. And those cards will stay out on the board until you play one to pick them up.
That's what I was going to ask next. Yeah. So those are all cards that everyone has the same. So you can kind of use that as decision making. Like, I know this person's already played their Loki card, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So I'm not worried about that. I can just go ahead and wipe them out now. Yep.
And so each of the gods naturally in a Simon game is going to have its own sculpt, its own warrior sculpts and stuff. All that stuff was insane and amazing. All the components were incredible on this Kickstarter edition. Everything was crazy. Some of the best minis I've ever seen. I don't really care about minis at all. But these were insane. But each god has a power, which I'll just tell you what they were. So my power, I think I was Horus, because that's yellow, is that I had these 2 little eyes, the eyes of Horus, and before the conflict began, I could put those out in some regions. And when it came to those regions for battle, I could say a card, and then no one could use that card in that round.
That's sweet.
So, but that included me. Right. So I could a little bit dictate how the flow of that was going to go. Another person was Bastet, I guess, and he had these 3 little cats that he could put out on temples, and the cats had either a +1, a +3, or a star on their base, and that was basically, they added combat strength to those regions. But if a player wanted on their turn, they could like, I don't know if it was killing cats or whatever, but they could attack these cats, hardcore. I guess. And they could remove them, but if they removed the one that had a star, then the piece that did the attacking died. So there was like a little risk-reward type thing, and it was just a little chaos in the thing. And then the third player, I can't remember who they were, but their power was that if a character died, they could take them onto their board, and it would increase the power of their god. So sometimes his god was like 3 strength instead of 1. The other big part of this, and that was like one of the minor levels of where the game varies from play to play, was that you'll have different mixes of gods or whatever. Then every board has these Ankh powers, which are separated in, there's like 4 rows and 6 columns. And as I said, there's an action, which is unlock Ankh powers. You pay some followers to take one of your pieces and slot it into this board. And what was both interesting and not interesting is that the powers are the same on every god board. Mm-hmm. It's the same set of however many that is, 24 god powers. And you basically get, or maybe it's only 12 or something, but you only get 2 out of each of the 4. There's kind of like a first chunk and a second chunk and a third chunk, and you get 2 of the first 4 and 2 of those 4 and 2 of those. And they do cool stuff. So that's where you're going to unlock some of those like long-term strategies that we talked about.
These are powers that like kind of will be unique to you in the game.
But yeah, you'll have them for your pieces or your god or your temples or whatever.
So like throughout the game, you're kind of like building a different. Exactly. You could do like a different character build, like you'd find in a video game almost.
But you have the same powers and could do the same build
if you want.
If you want, right? So those powers were pretty cool. Like the first ones kind of upgrade your income engine a little bit. Like when you get followers, get an extra follower. Or if you win a battle, get 3 points instead of 1. Stuff like that. The second level really interacted with your monuments. There's temples, whatever that's called. I was going to say basilisk. That's not right. Obelisk, thank you. See, it's not right. There's a lot of snakes in the game, but that's not it. And then pyramids. And they're, for the most part, they're indistinguishable in the game until you get to upgrading this level 2 Ankh powers. Because I had a power where every time I summoned figures, which normally you get 1 figure, I could put an additional figure next to every pyramid that I controlled. So that was kind of like the way my strategy was going, was that I could just like spam the board with all these guys. There's another one that was based on obelisks where he could basically, when a battle starts in a region, summon figures to the obelisk if he controlled it in that area. So if he had an obelisk all over the board, we could fight in level 1, in area 1. And then in area 2, if he had an obelisk, he could bring his figures over there, fight with those. And then if they were still around, keep pulling them around. So there's like huge teleporting armies.
The old teleport army strat.
Super cool. Yeah. And then there's one for temples where, and so we each did a different monument basically. The other player, his temples gave him additional strength in each area if he had a piece next to it. So that kind of thing is just cool. You know, It just kind of like started to shape those and give you a direction. And then the third level was where the catch-up mechanism started to come. So me and the other player who we fused, 2 became 1, we were both pretty behind. And there are like in the level 3, there things are like, the 2 that I unlocked were, if you lose a battle with 2 or more figures, you gain 2 points, which is, I think it's called devotion. So that's awesome, because then I could start throwing things, and since I had this like spamming power to put more figures out, I could start losing. And then the other one that I unlocked is if I gained devotion, I also gained another one. And so it was some of the rules were a little bit unclear, which is pretty common in these CMON things. We have a ton of power interactions.
I'm sure the fact will get built out over the next few weeks.
But so in the last several rounds, I had just a ton of points from that, because we would go to the first area, and I would get a point because I had the most pyramids. So I'd really get 2 points from my bonus. And then we'd have a battle there, and I'd win. And so I'd get another point, and then another point. And we'd go to the next region, and I would lose. But I had 2 figures, so now I got 2 and a bonus.
Yeah.
And that was a ton of points. I would say probably 2/3 of the points came in the last 2 battles basically, which was cool.
Did you find that the game slowed down in that last round then? Like things, I feel like a lot. To be clear with my question, I feel like a lot of these games with scaling powers, it feels like, the first 3/4 of the game and the last quarter of the game are roughly equivalent in terms of the time.
I did, it did slow down in terms of gameplay pace, especially when 2 of us had to kind of strategize together. That's a different dynamic. But on the timeline track, there's a much shorter length of time between those happening. So it was actually one of the most exciting things I've played in an area control game, where we got to that last phase and they even give you this cool little podium basically that you put the mini on top of, so he's super huge. Made it seem so cool, but really even though it probably took, I don't know, 15% longer, maybe 20% longer, not a huge bump. It just felt awesome. Yeah. It was really exciting. We were having a ton of fun. And the guy that was not merged was frustrated, thought he was going to lose so bad, and then he won.
He's this is rigged. How could I possibly win 2-on-1?
Yeah. Very cool.
That sounds like a ton of fun. So sounds like you'd play it again.
For sure.
And do you think there's room to explore more, if you took the same build again? Or is it more if you played again, you would try and do... I mean, I guess you might choose to try and do something different, but if you went the same build, do you think there would be room to explore there?
Well, yeah, obviously, if you're playing, one of these games, it's super strategic in that build, but also tactical in the positioning of the things, and there's a million different considerations. There's also, once a monument is claimed, you can't necessarily go back and take it away. You have to get all the unclaimed monuments before you can do that, and that can be difficult. So the game pulls you in directions regardless of that. It is interesting that it does reward you for going for a single thing. It wants you to do temples or pyramids.
Yeah, or I'm the obelisk guy.
Yeah, I think so, which surprised me that there wasn't anything that was, if you have one of each.
The generalist.
Yeah. Right, I had a power...
That's in the planned expansion.
I'm sure. Many of them. I'm sure there were many. I had a power which was if you have 3 of the same monument type, then your god is 3 power instead of 1. But I was really surprised when I read that. I thought for sure it would be a variety, but it was not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's... it is... I thought that the not replayability, but the variability in the game was a little lower than I expected. You have obviously the god powers, but those pretty much only impacted the conflict phase. Mm-hmm. So they happened 5, maybe, I guess could be more, but not most of the turns, essentially. The only other part I didn't mention is that as you unlock your Ankh powers, 3 times when that happens, you're going to get a monster. I don't know what they're called. And those have crazy powers.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And there's a ton of those. And then there's a ton of sculpts for those, of course. And those are cool.
Yeah.
We had a mummy out, and if the mummy died, they just respawned by your god. And so they never left. And that was cool. We had this crocodile guy who could go in the water spaces, and if he moved in the water and finished next to somebody, he could just kill them. So that was pretty awesome. You just gobble them from the water. And then the last power was instead of moving a piece, you could remove it from the board and get 3 followers. So I don't know. There's probably that's where a lot of the variability comes in the game. But to me, it still felt like maybe not that much.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think just comparing to my reference point of Blood Rage, right? The draft phase is gonna in Blood Rage. There's almost infinite variability because the draft can go differently every time, and maybe more importantly, even if you wanted to do something, you might not be able to, because the person right next to you is trying to get the same strategy going as you. Whereas so that does seem like a big divergence, where it's okay, well, I just going for the pyramids, so I'm always going to do that.
And we started out with a monument as well, and I don't know if the rules told us to do it. Probably. There are a ton of setups, so there was a 3-player setup in there probably. Tells us probably to have different monuments, and so we're just naturally going to go for different ones. Right. there's nothing that's gonna. But if you're playing a 4-player or a 5-player game, those conflict dynamics are different.
It would force, yeah.
Right? Or even with 2 players, where it's like you have maybe I'm this guy and you're that guy, but now we can also go fight over the third one.
Yeah,
that would be different.
Well, that's sounds really interesting. I would play it if given the chance. It's not like these kind of like dudes on a map game, troops on a map game, I guess I should say, are not traditionally like my go-to.
Yeah.
Because I guess in the past I feel like a lot of, I mentioned the snowballing, but also because player interaction is so core and things are not necessarily transparent, right, in terms of like who's winning, what kind of things you should be going for.
Sure.
I found myself in the past getting frustrated by things like, why are you attacking me? Like, Joe over here is obviously in first place. Like, you should be doing that.
Yep.
And they attack me, and we both lose a bunch of stuff. And then Joe, who was already in first place, then like runs away with the game.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that was present there, or were there elements of like, how clear was it, like, who was in the lead?
So there is this devotion track, which is the points track, and, there was a clear leader throughout. And so I think we had a pretty good sense that friend Tommy was, like, charging up that thing. And what was interesting was in the conflict phase, right before the 2 gods merged, that was in our mind, right? Where it was like, here's what's going to happen. Whoever has the lower devotion point, that's where we're going to go with our points, but we're going to use the like build of the higher god.
That's an interesting little thing.
So like we used my Ankh power build, which was kind of good because we had all these pyramids set up, and I had a lot more board presence than him, but all of his temples and obelisks and pyramids and figures and all his god, everything came off the board. So it was a kind of a big reset, and as we played that last little chunk, we definitely had in our mind, like, who's the leader and how should we kind of prepare to become allies.
The thing I like about that, too, is you, in some of these games, like optimal play, you might be inclined to, like, I'm just going to end it for this person. Like, they're in a bad position.
Right.
I can take this move and wipe them off completely. Or, or even they might just be incidental collateral in Blood Rage, right? Like, sorry that you just happen to be there with, like, the last remaining of the force. I'm not trying to go for you.
Yeah.
But
I need this point. I need this reward or whatever, and you have to.
And you're collateral and I don't care. Where in this, right, maybe you would think twice, because, like, well, if I make it impossible for them to get any more devotion, like, that could potentially come back to, like, bite me later in the game. That's pretty cool.
And there were, like, moments where he and I were kind of thinking, like, well, which of us wants to win this one?
Right.
Like,
at a certain point, you just realize, like, oh, we're actually teammates even, like, before that happened.
Now, I will say,
that's cool.
In a game like this, you have, obviously, all these power interactions and triggers that you have to pay attention to. And we may have, like, really messed up the game missing some things.
Sure.
Like I said, with all those devotion combos on my Ankh track, or my Ankh powers or whatever, I think there was like another 5 to 7 points I should have gotten in the last conflict, and maybe the other 2 players should have merged. But we didn't realize that until after we'd already done all we'd like slashed the board to pieces. So it wasn't, but it didn't matter, you know? It was still cool. And one other mechanism that was both really exciting and probably some people will really not like is that the devotion track has an end, and if you reach the end, you just win. And that's how our game ended. We were really, like, right on top of each other, points-wise, hanging out, and then Tommy had this power where whenever he got devotion, he could pay 2 followers to get more devotion. And so he did that right at the end to win. Had we played one of our plague cards, maybe we could have removed some of his followers through that kind of, like, essentially forcing him to sacrifice that, but we kind of held it for something that didn't happen.
Is that how the game always ends, or is there a round limit also?
Yeah, there's a round limit. So the track will have, I think, 3 conflict phases, and then 2 gods will merge. Maybe 4, something like that. And then 2 gods will merge, the bottom 2. Even in a 5-player game, bottom 2 will merge. And then there's basically, I want to say 2 more conflict phases. And after that, there's like a red portion on this the devotion track. Anybody that's in the red portion still they're dead. They're removed. All their stuff's off the board. They're out. Player elimination, essentially. Wow. Which we thought was going to happen. And it could happen that you just lose. You all lose. That could happen in the game.
Everyone.
Everybody's just, the game's over, nobody won. And you just go, well, I had more devotion, I win. But I think that's probably not going to happen a lot. And then if there are some players left, maybe in a 5-player game, 3 players are left, there's a little more and then one final conflict.
Yeah.
So I thought all of that game shape was cool.
Man, it sounds fascinating. I think I want to try it. I think for me what it's going to come down to is the fogginess I feel on the board.
Yeah.
And then also just how much I guess how annoying I find questionable rules interactions too, because I really hate when a game forces you to audit what other people are kind of doing.
And say okay, well hold on, you can't do that. That's not fun.
These kind of big miniature games do seem kind of prone to that, right? Just because of all the ways the different powers interact.
That was very in my play. I think I've only played Rising Sun once, but that was very much my experience. Where the god powers, whatever they were called, they were insanely huge and really confusing, and that made it not fun. I also didn't love the battle system in Rising Sun, but it worked better here. So I think of the 3, this is my favorite.
Cool.
Because it's I love the drafting in Blood Rage, but I find that when I play it, I really do feel a rage in my body. The area control of it makes me really angry and worked up, and I don't always love that, I was really hoping to love Rising Sun because it's supposed to be kind of
negotiation.
Diplomacy, which is one of my favorite games that I never get to play. But I think that Ankh kind of is the sweet spot for me in terms of the way that the game flows, the simplicity of it, and it seems pretty nice.
It sounds fun, and I think when you said the 5-player game has the bottom 2 merging, that just sounds like a really
cool,
fun social experience for a big game.
Yeah.
Maybe you're having some beers and just not try-harding too much, and it just seems like that would be a great time.
Yeah.
If the game can kind of get out of its way.
My gut tells me that 3 and 4 players is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
That's coming off of 1 play, so take that with a grain of salt. But 5 could be a long time. But if you're experienced, like I said, the turn structure is pretty simple, and so could zoom along.
Yeah. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is our, Paul's impression of Ankh. I did want to bring up one other recent play I had. Paul, have you played Sagrada?
Yeah.
Are you familiar?
I owned Sagrada for a period of time, and it has a mechanism in it that I really am drawn to, which is kind of the variability of scoring.
Yeah.
Didn't end up loving it. It's not in the collection anymore, but...
Yeah, so... this is a game probably many people who listen to this podcast would already be familiar with, but if not, it is an abstract dice drafting and placement game about building your own kind of personal stained glass in front of you. And it has this really fun production touch where you have the stained glass template. You get a kind of randomly dealt a pattern card of what color of die you need to place where and what numbers in some other places, and you kind of slide it into the template, and then when you draft die throughout the game, you actually put them in, and it's a really satisfying, well-produced game that looks great on the table.
Definitely looks good on the
table. My wife and I had a friend over recently, played a couple of games. We started off with Hey, That's My Fish, one of my favorites, especially for, less experienced gamers, I guess I'll say, just because it's so much like checkers, right?
Yeah,
it's just there's no rules.
Move it around.
And instantly understandable, but still really fun and engaging for me. So we did that. That was a big hit. Except for I did the thing I always do because I
can't help yourself.
So I played it a lot online. I was like, this is the best game ever. I'm going to buy it. And I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, let's play. And I like have to like build the board. And
It's
this is the worst. Like it takes forever.
I tried to 3D print like a thing for it at one point to like hold the pieces. It never came out. But maybe I will.
For whatever reason, I've done this like twice where I start like putting the tiles up and I'm like, I shouldn't see these, so I start putting them face down.
Oh no!
And then I get like halfway through and I'm like,
this is a
I have to
idea.
flip these all over. I just start over. So that's what I did.
That's bad.
That aside, we played Sagrada. And you know, it's this really fun game, I think, that fits like right in with a game like Azul.
Yeah.
And I just think it's weird because like it's such a well-designed game to me that it's really difficult for me to like critique any of the decisions. Like I love how simple the rules are. You basically can't put a color die next to another one of the same color or number next to the same number. And you're drafting die basically in a little snake draft, which is a drafting little format that I love.
For sure.
Near and dear to my heart. I think it's such an easy and intuitive way to balance a draft. And then there are different tool cards. You're only going to play with 3 out of like 12 in the base game. So there's always, not only do you have variability in the pattern you get, but there's variability in the tools. You know, these allow you to break the game rule in some way. Like maybe you can move a die next to another one of the same color, you know, spending some resources, which you'll have a limited amount, like 4 to 6 of these resources at the beginning of the game. And then once a tool is used, it costs 1 the first time and 2.
And those are points you're paying.
Yeah, you're paying points. So I like that. I love trade-offs and such a straightforward trade-off like that. It creates really interesting decisions.
Yeah.
And then I get to the end of the game. You know, we count up our points, and I always like left like, even though it's like nothing there's nothing I can really critique it for.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I'm just like left a little bit wanting at the end of my plays.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like maybe sometimes it comes down just like a little bit too much to like what the last dies pulled out of the bag is, like whether you'll be able to complete
the lucky
it or
right
not.
at the end and stuff. Yeah, when I played it, I felt like, you know, to play it well, I had to have a really good, like, you know, court vision, essentially, to see everything going on, like, have a plan of where things were going to go. Obviously, the dice draft will get in your way in terms of doing that, but then, again, the thing that I loved is that you have, I think, 3 cards telling you what you're going to score, right? And maybe you get you probably remember the ones from your...
Right, yeah, sorry, there's variable scoring as well. I didn't even say that.
Because there's no base scoring. There's no like every game you get a point for whatever.
Yeah. So the scoring cards, you'll pull 3 out and they'll be like, okay, you'll score 2 points for every set of a 1 and a 2, or you'll get a point or some amount of points for having an entire row with no repeated numbers or something like that.
Right, exactly. And so it gives you something to shoot for that's different in each game, which I love. Like Isle of Skye, I think is the best game that does that. Yeah. Because every game does feel different for that reason. But they're pretty hard.
Yeah.
They're pretty hard to accomplish. And so you work really hard for them, and one turn of forgetting can ruin that for you. You know, where if I forget that this row had to be whatever, and that die had to be a 3 so that this one could be a blue 2 specifically, then, you know, your game can fall apart. And that's not necessarily bad, but that's where I didn't love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of times, like, the game will put you... Like, it is a game where you're drawing die out of the bag and you're rolling them. Yeah. And there's a lot of thinking.
You're taking them out and you're rolling them.
Yeah, so random color, random number. So there's a lot of thinking and strategically placing die in a way that's going to give yourself the most possible options that fits both with, like, what your pattern allows you to legally place and the various goals you're going for. And then, like, those may not come up. Yeah. And in that case, like, you know, too bad, so sad. You're going to have to do something like unoptimal sacrifice scoring one way or another. Yeah. Your pick, if you can do anything at all. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I get that. I feel like it's quick enough that I don't feel like it's too random of a game. I'm sure that this is a game that has a feeling, I don't know for sure, of a game that would have just like an incredibly high skill ceiling if there was like a tournament scene.
Sure, and you can look at what other people need and think about, I mean, you know, the AP could get very high.
Yeah, it could get very high. But yeah, I don't know. The other thing that happened in this particular session of it was we started counting up kind of our scores at the end, and it was like revealed that one player had 2 like 4s next to each other.
Yeah.
Which is like something that I feel like happens in this game in particular, like all the time. Because, and it's not that anyone's like trying to cheat,
right.
Of course. It's just like your brain's bandwidth is so tied up with like, okay, I have to like match this objective and this objective and this objective, and like, okay, this has to be blue. I can put a 4 over here, and then like you do something and just like without realizing you've just like lost track of
I think
one
the rules
thing.
They say what happens, right? It's like you just take it out and it's.
I think so. There are
lose
like,
a point or something.
There are like ways to do it, but it's still it just feels like very unsatisfying at the very end of the game.
It's an asterisk on this one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's
no,
like, okay, you got the most points. You got the most legitimate points.
Right. The other thing that I remember disliking a little bit was if there is a base scoring, it's that each player has a card that's private to them, no one knows, which is like you're the red person.
Yeah, everyone gets one color.
And so you're going to get a point for every pip in your stained glass that's on a red die. So you immediately want all the red 6s. And every time you get a red 6, it's 6 points.
Right, which is a lot.
It's insane because like a line of whatever is going to be 10. And that's 6 dice you had to place to get that 10 points. So I felt like the strategy of the game was really driven by that and made it immediately obvious that you're the green person or whatever, but it didn't necessarily mean that I could stop you.
Right. And there are more die in the bag than will come out over the course of the game, I think, unless maybe not if you're playing with the full complement of players. But like I think maybe that is a place that I would feel comfortable saying, like, I'm not crazy about that design decision.
Sure. You might just have more reds.
You could easily play out without it. But yeah, like, there could very easily just more reds come out of the bag than greens. Yeah. Or, all the greens that come out of the bag are which value 1 to 3. And whereas, like, the reds are all 6s.
Sure.
And that's going to make it really hard for the green player. I'm not sure that having, from our kind of lens of decision space, I'm not sure that having that card that tells you, essentially all it's telling you is like you prioritize this color.
You have a direction,
Yeah, I'm not sure that makes the decision more interesting.
Right.
If anything, it might make it less interesting.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think it's a really good, it's a really good family game, and it's like an intro game and stuff. I think it's still engaging. I play it.
Yeah,
I totally play.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's a nitpick. It's a fun game and one I'll like happily bring out again, especially with like, gamers like maybe starting out on their journey into board games, or maybe just like interested in kind of like an artistic theme.
Yeah.
Which makes a big deal. And
have you played any of the expansions or anything like that?
I haven't. No.
I was really tempted to almost get it again. To try the expansion, which gives you like an additional drafting board and some other stuff. But ultimately, I didn't think it was going to do it.
Yeah, I might pick it up if I get the chance, because I think that's also like the other, like this game might be, it's like in the range of like a 7 or 8 for me. Mm-hmm. Like a very good game, very fun.
8's pretty high.
Yeah, high. Like I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. And I'm happy to own it. It's going to stay in the collection. Yeah. But maybe it's just like, this is going to sound weird, but it feels like almost like, in some ways, like too produced, where the game, it's like everything about it is like very nice, but like all your games are going to be very nice. And sometimes I like my games to be like
a little less control.
Like just like more range of like outcomes of how this play experience is going to be. Like, It's weird to say, but like the game like having the potential to be like that game like just like didn't really come together that time.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
But then sometimes you're like, that was like the best session of this game ever.
Right. True.
Could be some. I feel like a game like that is more likely to make it into my like top 10 because of the potential for
big,
the
memorable moments,
sessions.
That makes
sense.
A
game like Azul or Sagrada, which are always just like that was very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pleasant.
Yeah,
yeah, I know what you mean. And some games are a little bit overbalanced sometimes too, where I've gotten rid of games from my collection because every game it was like everybody's got 50 to 60 points, no matter what you can conceive of doing. and that
like it's just on. You realize it's like on rails.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it's too bad.
And I don't know that Sagrada's like that because it's that is definitely a game that like gives players the opportunity to make horrible choices.
Definitely, yeah, for sure.
So, not necessarily. I'm not saying that it's like a game that's like on rails like that way, but just it's just always like a moderately fun, awesome game. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah,
I feel like
definitely.
I'm coming across as like very negative.
Well, you said 7 to 8, so I take that as a high recommendation.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's more like a 6.5 to 7.5. Thinking about whatever the verbiage is on what the BGG ratings is. I would recommend it to people, so I think that makes it like a 7.
I think I'll go 7.5. Good game that I would not turn down the opportunity to play.
Yeah, very strong.
Awesome. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of our conversation today. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
On this episode of Jake and Paul Talks About Games, episode 2.
I want to be Brendan's official lieutenant now.
But you're welcome anytime. Anytime Brendan has a baby. I hope you'll
see if we can make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything to?
The last thing I just want to mention is that I have been playing My City from Reiner Knizia, and which, if you don't know, is a pretty cheap, like $25 to $35 legacy game, polyomino tile laying, bingo style where everybody lays the same thing down, and it's got 24 games in the box. You're kind of meant to play these chapters where it's like 8 chapters of 3 episodes in once. So you kind of play 3 in a row every time, and I really didn't think it was going to be very interesting because it's so simply just, here's the shape, put it down, fill your board type stuff. But it gets really, really cool, really fast. And our games have been so fun and just full of, I don't know, it just really has been a huge surprise.
And you're playing at 2 players?
I'm playing at 3 players. It's 2 to 4. And, if you can play 4, that's good, because I'm basically just throwing away components, which doesn't feel great. But the changes in the game are really cool, and depending on who wins each little game, you get some progress points, and most progress points will kind of win the campaign, but also there are catch-up mechanisms built in, where if I lose this game, I might get a different sticker to put on my board, which helps me in the long term. And it really unfolds in a pretty interesting way. It's taken a pretty big shift here about halfway through without giving anything away. There's not really big narrative. It's pretty standard city building stuff. But everything has felt really, really fun. And like I said, the first time we played it, we did 3 in a row. And then we went and played a different game. And then we came back and did another 3 in a row. And that felt like a lot. And then last night, we did 3 in a row and immediately did another 3 in a row and then played Ankh and then did another 3 in a row.
Wow.
So that's, 9 games of it in one session, and we definitely could have kept going, but I was up too late.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one that I'm definitely going to try. So maybe we can leave that there, and potentially if I ever get the chance, we could come back and do it, like devote a whole
big
episode
recommendation.
to it. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, Paul. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode all the way to the end. If you want, we've got a Discord community that's very fun. We're playing a lot of games with people in there asynchronously and occasionally live. And we're on Twitter and all those good things. So thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your game. You are now exiting the decision space. Thanks for listening. Please take care and enjoy the rest of your game.